We question how it's possible that someone, anyone, could be capable of killing again and again, seemingly without remorse.
In reality, we know that there's some common denominators that most of them have.
There are hundreds of recorded cases of serial murders dating back centuries, but the term serial killer is actually pretty new. The first known published reference found in a New York Times article from 1981 that described a serial or pattern murderer. That was referring to Wayne Williams, suspected in the deaths of more than 30 children. The FBI defines serial killers as anyone who murders 2 or more people in separate incidents.
It means that they think about what they've done and they go out and do it again.
And serial killers typically have a few other traits in common.
Ever wondered what it's like for a family of serial killers? Those who kill are heavily scrutinized and hated by the public. And oftentimes this outrage is passed on to their family members. In trying to answer the burning question of why, the public always tries to focus on the behaviors and values of the perpetrators. And alas, this extends to their mother figures. While it is impossible not to crave more information about these women, we have to admit that this puts a target on their backs. What is life like after their children's actions upend everything? And how do these women deal with it? Join us as we highlight some of the most extreme reactions of some of the worst serial killers. Joyce Flint. There isn't much that can be said about the notorious Jeffrey Dahmer that isn't already known. He received a life sentence for every man that he killed. The infamous American serial killer killed 17 men between 1978 and 1991. He dismembered, had sex with, and photographed their corpses after each murder. He kept disturbing mementos from the murders as well as Polaroid pictures which were only discovered after his arrest in 1991.
Has been a number of human specimens found within the apartment, and to a certain extent they have been there sometime.
Dahmer was methodical in how he tracked down and killed his victims. According to biography, he regularly picked up the victims at gay bars, shopping centers, and bus stops before luring them back to his house with promises of cash or sex. He also seemed to have a preference for black, Latino, and Asian men. After giving his victims drug-laced alcohol, Dahmer would kill them. After the victims passed away, Dahmer would have sex with their corpses and dismember them, sometimes keeping body parts like their skulls or genitalia as mementos. One time, Dahmer poured hydrochloric acid into the head of one victim, 19-year-old Errol Lindsay, who died 6 months before his daughter was born. Just like Errol, all other victims of Dahmer had big dreams and families who loved them. According to the New York Times, he planned to dispose of their bones in a 57-gallon bucket he had acquired particularly for that purpose. At the end of the day, he received a total of 17 life sentences for every man that he killed. However, sometime in 1994, a prison mate who believed the death penalty was a better option killed him. His mother, Joyce Flint, was affected by his actions so much that she actually became suicidal. What do you do when you learn something so horrible about your child? Joyce Flint Dahmer had a pretty normal reaction to her son's actions. Shock, sadness, loss, and guilt. It must have been a roller coaster.
When you heard this news about your son?
Well, it wouldn't be very easy to forget. I'd come home about a half an hour early, and one of my friends from Ohio, where the news came on a couple hours earlier, called and had a hard time telling me why they wanted me to watch television. But I found out about it like everyone else. In about a half an hour, he was on television.
In an interview with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel in 1995, she said, "When I think of what Jeff did, I stop breathing." Joyce's story is hinged on the fact that her son was reportedly a typical, content, and happy child, up until he underwent a hernia operation at age 4. Having a master's degree in counseling herself, she believes that to be the breaking point for him.
I know this sounds strange, but he did not mean to hurt anyone.
According to Joyce, Jeffrey became distant after a procedure, a factor that may have contributed to the mental breakdown that made him a murderer. She still loved her son and managed to speak to him once every week while he was incarcerated. She told the Journal Sentinel, "I said to him, I asked him, 'Do you still have these urges?' He acknowledged, 'Yes, Mum. I'm so glad I'm locked up. I'd be worried about what I might do if I wasn't restrained.'" Joyce referred to her son as the victim of an obsession, a compulsion, in an interview with Hard Copy in 1993.
A victim of a compulsion, an obsession. When I went to visit him, I asked him what it had been like during all of these years, and
what did he say to that?
He said, I was so scared. I was scared every minute, and I tried to stop, and I couldn't.
Despite being held accountable for what her son has become, Joyce claims she doesn't accept blame. In her own words, "I am aware on a philosophical level that I was a good parent. I was aware that this couldn't have originated with Jeff. We still hold mothers accountable."
And one of the things that our society does have to be aware of is that we still do have a prejudice. We have a stereotype, and we still do blame mothers. It's on the job, having an employer tell me to take Jeff's picture off my desk, to that I would no longer be allowed to represent the company in the public, that I'd sort of become the elephant in the living room. Just little kind of insidious kinds of things, and no matter how well prepared you might be, they do play on your emotions and how you feel about yourself.
To escape the judgment and name-calling, she had tried to move in with her younger son David, who had already relocated and changed his name after his brother's arrest. But that did not do any good, so she ended up relocating to Fresno, California. But in spite of that, she did not abandon him. Up until he died, she still made efforts to help her son become better. She believed that therapy for her son and a study of Jeffrey's case for society would both be advantageous. In her own words, "He isn't a monster, he is a living, breathing human, and I believe he deserves some assistance." However, she also empathized with the families of her son's victims. She often expressed that what her son did caused her to feel guilty and tormented. She even goes as far as comparing her pain with that of their families. She claimed, "I'll be tormented in agony for eternity just like they are." At some point, she even tried to take her own life. She admitted that the pain got to her but expressed gratitude that her attempt was not successful. But that's not the most shocking thing. After his demise, Joyce and Jeffrey's father engaged in a custody dispute in an odd turn of events. His father wanted it cremated at Jeffrey's request through his will, while Joyce fought to keep his brain intact so that it could be used for research purposes. One last attempt to understand or maybe prove that her son was a victim of something bigger than himself.
Do not have an explanation for Jeff's behavior. In the absence of an explanation for anything, we get scared. We're afraid of unknowns. So we go for prefabricated answers, such as the parents and especially the moms. And this has been a ready-made answer. Mother, the monster maker, has been the easy way out of dealing with something we just can't explain.
At the end of the day, a judge ruled that his ashes be divided between the parents in accordance with Jeffrey's wishes. Finding out if Jeffrey's behaviors were caused by any physiological aspects of his brain might have been quite interesting. Sadly, the world will never know. Before dying of breast cancer in the year 2000, she dedicated her time to caring for people with HIV at a community center in Fresno. Amy Roof, after discovering her child's wrongdoings, this mother experienced a literal heartbreak. Her son, Dylan Roof, opened fire, killing 9 people inside a church after their Bible study. At first, she could not fathom that the mass murder was racially motivated, but this was not her only reaction to the heinous crime. It happened at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in the heart of Charleston, South Carolina, the United States, on the 17th of June 2015. A white man around the age of 21, who was later identified as Roof, opened fire with a handgun during a regular Bible study at the church, killing 9 people. At the time of the attack, Roof didn't have a job and resided in the primarily African-American neighborhood of Eastover. In this footage, Dylan can be seen preparing for his heinous crime. A childhood friend claims that Roof launched into a tirade about the death of Trayvon Martin and the 2015 Baltimore protests that were started by Freddie Gray's passing while being held by the police. That friend later admitted that he frequently spoke about blacks taking over the world. Roof allegedly told friends and neighbors about his intentions to kill individuals, including a plan to attack the College of Charleston, but his claims were not taken seriously. In fact, Roof's gun had briefly been hidden away from him by one of his friends, who later said, "I don't think the church was his primary target because he told us he was going for the school. However, I think he couldn't get into school because of the security." Sadly, this bump in the road did not deter Roof. Instead, he chose the church next. Another close friend of Roof's, who is African American, claimed that although he had never heard Roof express any racism, a week prior to the shooting, Roof had confided in him that he intended to carry out a shooting at the college. Roof later admitted to carrying out the Charleston attack on June 18, 2015, intending to ignite a race war, and he reportedly told investigators that he almost decided against carrying out his mission because the people in the church study group had been so kind to him.
For the loved ones of the Charleston Nine, it has been 573 days of agony since the avowed white supremacists walked into the historic Emmanuel AME Church and opened fire.
The Last Rhodesian, a website found 3 days after the shooting, was later identified and confirmed as being owned by Roof. The website featured pictures of Roof holding up neo-Nazi and white supremacy symbols, as well as a manifesto outlining his opinions on various racial groups. In his own words, "I don't have a choice. I am not in a position to walk into the ghetto and fight alone. I selected Charleston since it is the most historic city in my state, and it had the greatest black to white ratio in the country. We don't have any skinheads or true KKK members, and no one is doing anything beyond chatting on the internet. Someone needs to be bold enough to take it to the real world, and I think that has to be me."
During the trial's penalty phase, Roof offered no apology for the massacre. "I felt like I had to do it," he said. "I still feel like I had to do it."
He also stated in the manifesto that he became a white supremacist after reading about Trayvon Martin's 2012 murder and other black on white assaults. "I read the Wikipedia article, and right away I couldn't understand what the big deal was," he wrote. "It was clear that Zimmerman was correct, but more significantly, this caused me to search black on white crime on Google, and I've never been the same since." The first website I visited was the Council of Conservative Citizens. There were pages and pages of these heinous black on white killings. I was stunned. Something was clearly incorrect at this point. How can the media be focusing on Trayvon Martin while ignoring hundreds of black on white murders? Roof was found guilty in federal court on December 15, 2016, of all 33 charges against him that stemmed from the shooting, including hate crimes. On the 11th of January 2017, he was given the death penalty for those offences. Roof agreed to enter a guilty plea to all state charges against him, including 9 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and a possession of a firearm while committing a felony, in state court in South Carolina on the 31st of March 2017. This was done to avoid the death sentence. He later consented to a life sentence without the possibility of parole in exchange for the formal admission of guilt on the 10th of April 2017. He was then given 9 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. After collapsing in front of the jury, his mother, Amy Roof, later expressed regret for the incident. She had a heart attack, which was only discovered once she got to the hospital. Although Amy's position on her son's case is not entirely clear, she was actually overheard telling him to hire a stronger defense team and behave more appropriately in court. Dylan Roof, on the other hand, appeared to make light of the proceedings and was still overheard joking about the prospect of the death penalty.
He told jurors that only one of them had to disagree with the death penalty sentence to spare his life. "From what I've been told, I have the right to ask you to give me a life sentence, but I'm not sure what good it would do anyway."
As for his early claims that his primary driving force behind the killings was his desire to start a race war, Amy was reportedly torn between wanting to support her son and finding his behavior repulsive. Sue Klebold. Sue Klebold has been featured in numerous interviews and is arguably the most well-known mother on this list. Her son, Dylan Klebold, and his partner carried out the Columbine High School shooting and made history by killing over 13 people and leaving 24 injured on the 20th of April in 1999. When trying to piece together the background of this crime, you would find that there are many conflicting accounts. Some claim that Harris and Klebold were extremely unpopular students and frequent targets of bullying, while others assert that they were not at the bottom of the social hierarchy at their school, and that they both had a large number of friends and active social lives. Popular students, mostly athletes, were known to receive preferential treatment from teachers and fellow students at Columbine High School because of its strong jock culture. Nearly a year before the attack in May 1998, Harris and Klebold appeared to have started planning it based on their journal entries. In the ensuing 11 months, Harris and Klebold painstakingly assembled explosives and a collection of weapons. Both Harris and Klebold left behind a number of journal entries and home videos that explained their motivations and foreshadowed the murderous act. Harris and Klebold hoped that this material would be widely viewed by the public and attract followers, but they must not have considered the fact that the authorities might withhold these pieces of evidence from the public. Following the shooting, it was widely believed that Harris and Klebold belonged to the Trenchcoat Mafia, a group of outcasts in the school who allegedly rebelled against the popular students. Harris and Klebold frequently wore trench coats to school as part of their everyday attire. The journal entries led to the conclusion that Klebold was an angry depressive with a vengeful attitude towards people who, in his opinion, had mistreated him. Despite these findings, the precise reason behind the attack is still unknown. Harris and Klebold's original plan stated that they would be waiting in their cars when their bombs exploded, and they would shoot, stab and throw bombs at survivors of the initial explosion as they fled the school. The attack started at noon, and shortly after that, bombs planted in the attackers' personal vehicles went off, killing anyone nearby, as well as first responders. After their crude explosives in the school failed to go off, Harris and Klebold took it upon themselves to open fire in the school, shooting down their classmates and teachers. It was America's deadliest high school shooting, until the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting by Nicholas Cruz in 2018 surpassed it. 8 of the 13 confirmed deaths were caused by Harris, Rachel Scott, Daniel Robra, teacher Dave Sanders, Steve Kernow, Cassie Bernal, Isaiah Scholes, Kelly Fleming, and Daniel Mauser, while the other 5, Kyle Velasquez, Matthew Ketcher, Lauren Townsend, John Tomlin, and Corey DePuta, were caused by Klebold. 24 additional people suffered injuries. By 12:02 p.m, the murdering duo moved to the library, and they started shooting at the passing police from the west windows. Thankfully, nobody was hurt during this exchange. However, by 12:08 p.m, Harris and Klebold committed suicide. While Klebold kneeled down and fired his TEC-9 gun into his left temple, Harris sat down with his back to a bookshelf and fired his shotgun through the roof of his mouth. Sue Klebold, the mother of Dylan, responded by apologizing in public for having missed all the warning signs that eventually convinced Dylan to commit one of the most infamous mass shootings in history.
13 people who died and 24 people who were injured. Most of them children.
Yes.
What is it you want to say to them?
The one thing, of course, that I want to say is I am so sorry for what my son did. Yet I know that just saying I'm sorry is such an inadequate response to all this suffering. There is never a day that goes by where I don't think of the people that Dylan harmed. And
You use the word harm.
Harmed, I think it's easier for me to say harmed than killed. And it's still hard for me after all this time.
Is that about a certain need to deny what happened, or?
I don't know, perhaps.
She has also published a best-selling memoir titled A Mother's Reckoning, The Aftermath of Tragedy. Dylan appeared to be a loving child as he grew up, but in high school his behavior changed. Since then, Sue has taken a stand against suicide. Her memoir's sales are entirely donated to good causes.
And the helicopters were going over, and I remember thinking, if this is true, if Dylan is really hurting people, somehow he has to be stopped. And then at that moment I prayed that he would die, that God, stop this, just make it stop. Don't let him hurt anybody.
Sue is constantly considering what she might have done differently and plans to stop the same thing from happening in the future. Next up is Kathleen Dennehy, and this particular mother was not having any of her daughter's crimes. Kathleen has been very vocal about how pretty relieved she felt that her daughter, a serial killer, was behind bars. She is convinced that her once loving and sweet child is dead. Joanna Dennehy is currently serving a life sentence in prison after being found guilty of multiple counts of murder. The Peterborough Ditch murders were a string of homicides that occurred in Cambridgeshire, England in March 2013. They all had been stabbed to death, and they were all male. Outside Peterborough, their dead bodies were found dumped in ditches. 2 more men were stabbed in Hereford, but survived. Joanna Christine Dennehy, a woman from Cambridgeshire, was arrested as the suspect in the case.
You are Joanna Christina Dennehy. So you've been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder and murder. Okay.
When she eventually went to trial, she stunned her defense team when she outrightly pleaded guilty.
The fact that Joanna Dennehy decided to admit murdering these 3 men and denying them a lawful burial took the whole of Court 2 by surprise, including her defense barrister, who said that proceedings weren't going as anticipated. So the judge asked Joanna Dennehy in the dock what she'd said. She told him, "I have pleaded guilty, and that's that."
She was given a life sentence with a whole life order. She is the first woman in English history to receive an order for her entire life. Joanne was a single mother of 2 young children when the killings occurred. Throughout her murderous rampage, she specifically targeted men, telling her friend Lloyd that she didn't want to kill any women, let alone those with children. Lloyd claimed that Dennehy intended to emulate Bonnie and Clyde by killing 9 men in total. Another man, Stretch, who aided her crimes, later admitted that Dennehy often told him, "I want my fun," as he stabbed men for entertainment. "I need you to get my fun." Gary Stretch, formerly known as Gary Richards, was a friend of Dennehy, and he always drove her to Hereford each time she committed a murder. In a later interview with a psychiatrist, Dennehy admitted that she had found murder to be Moorish, and that after the first murder, she had developed a taste for it. Her mother, Kathleen Dennehy, had a lot to say following her crimes. She acknowledged that Joanna was a quiet, compassionate child who valued all life, and would even become upset if she unintentionally stepped on a bug. Quite unfortunate that the defense was unable to call the bugs in to testify in Joanna's favor. Not like she needed it anyway. Joanna's mother was devastated by the violence she displayed because of drugs and other abnormal behavior. However, Joanna's mental illness, which included psychopathic and antisocial disorders, which she was later diagnosed with, was probably the primary factor. Since disowning her daughter, Kathleen sincerely believes that the person her daughter once was does not exist anymore.